So Andrew, you've undertaken many years of research in the UK and internationally on boards from across the private, public and third sectors. What would you say are the key findings and learnings from this body of research?
The key finding is one, and that is when boards and organisations, when the management team find themselves in difficulty, when they can't handle certain challenges, the biggest problem is talking about that. The level of inhibition at top levels is serious. Now, why that inhibition is there could be for personal reasons. You don't want to offend the chairman or the CEO. It could be because you may be personally involved in that particular challenge. Or it could be that the toxicity of the environment, the meeting and the culture in the meeting is so bad, people feel reluctant to speak. But the biggest problem is raising the concerns that you know are going to damage the organisation.
And you see this internationally across different geographies and across the sectors?
Different geographies, different sectors, government, health, police, even military. It makes no difference. The real problem is size, because organisations are big and the complexities somehow have to be unravelled. And also, if you like, personalities, and how those personalities create an environment where people can talk or people find it difficult to raise issues.
So the focus is on governance and strategic oversight as a stewardship responsibility. What's the difference between compliance and stewardship, and what does stewardship really mean at board level?
One of the most oldest traditions is governance. It is on the same level in terms of written documents as religion, 3,500 years. The very first document on governance was 3,500 years ago, Mesopotamia. The ruler wrote a document, what are the role and responsibilities of the ruler, role and responsibilities of the citizen, and in order to make those requirements work, compliance was introduced. So compliance is the legal way forward to ensure that your responsibilities are put into practice. But at the same time, stewardship looks at how easy or difficult is it to make those compliance requirements work. What are the challenges? What is the culture like? What are people's emotions and feelings like? And how do you, in making something work, engage with the population that you wish to get on your side? And that's stewardship. How do we engage with people who have different interests, who come from a different background and have different needs, so that we pull together in a way that we're aligned, so that the governance of our society, our company, even our church, our small institution, can work to the satisfaction of all of the members of the community.
Now, what would you say are some of the key skills and capabilities that a board director should have?
The first is to simply understand what's happening in that context. The intellectual capacity to make a compelling case when all the moving parts are continually moving and changing, so that other people can see that this thing that the director has identified makes sense to them. The director has explained their problems, their concerns, the way they're living their life, why things are going wrong, why things are going right. So the intellectual skill to analyze and grab data and evidence whilst the world is moving around you is number one. Number two is the sensitivity to the people that you're dealing with, working with. Some of them are right in front of you. They're called board directors or managers in the company. Some of them are distant because they're called press, media, a regulator in government. But your sensitivity to understand how they're going to react to the compelling case that you've made and how they're likely to engage or not with you is critical. Now, under these complex circumstances, when things change, and there you are, the one person on the pedestal who could be blamed for everything, your resilience. Are you strong enough as a character to stand up to the pressures that are in that situation and still make the case and still engage with people and still be consistent so that people can trust you and know that you're credible? So it's intellect, it's engagement skills, sensitivity, and resilience.
And would you say resilience is key as part of this?
I would have said intellect is more key, because if you cannot make that compelling case, there's nothing to listen to. I would have said intellect one, and then the personal skills of engagement and resilience are joint second.
And are there particular gaps or emerging areas that boards currently have in terms of these skill sets? I'm thinking, for example, digital.
Yes, there are. There are new movements. There's digital, there's blockchain, there's new types of organization structures coming out, especially with the cryptocurrencies. But then the reality is of how you perform in this particular situation. And that hasn't changed for thousands of years. So you can have a board director who's excellent in one organization on one board, and in their portfolio is another board, and that afternoon they go to this other board and they're awful. So the one thing that has not changed, and it taxes so many people, is context. Why do I perform well here, but I do not perform well somewhere else? And the reason is the personalities that are there, the toxicity that is there, your ability to get onto people's wavelength in one situation but not the other, and most of all, the respect that you must have of the problems that you face. So when I talk about people being inhibited or not being able to respond, it's very difficult for someone who hasn't been on a board to respect that. It sounds weak, it sounds soft, it somehow sounds inappropriate. But every one of us has faced situations in life where we don't get on each other's wavelength. Parents do that with their kids, across families, across institutions. So respecting that you are going to perform differently from one situation to the next, and you're still the same professional person, actually is the biggest challenge we face.
The other one I was thinking about is ESG and the net zero in terms of boards working towards those targets. Do you think boards are prepared and ready for this?
No. ESG has got the likelihood of ending up with CSR, corporate social responsibility, which was a lovely buzzword in the 90s and early 2000s and got nowhere. The reason is there is no financial reporting of ESG. We can report as much as we want on something that's optional, but until you're held to account in your budget and by your shareholders every year so that we can see what is the relationship between the spend and investment in ESG and the outcomes, what will happen is that ESG will always be a nice buzzword, and unless ESG has some direct relevance to your company, for example, someone in the resources business or the oil business is going to take a lot of notice of the E part, because if they don't, they will have all sorts of problems. But why should they take notice of the S part? It may not be relevant. So E, S, and G are three separate topics. We should have financial reporting for each one, and until we do, what we will have is three nice buzzwords that will end up meaning little.
And just a final question, in terms of accountability and responsibility, how do you see in terms of the evolving of directorship, accountability and responsibility emerging in the next few years?
This is probably one of the most interesting questions. And most people would not really understand the difference between accountability and responsibility. I'm accountable because of my role. I have to do X, Y, and Z. But I may not feel responsible. So a board director is accountable to ensure that the compliance side, the legal procedures, the disciplines, the processes, the box ticking is done. But they may not feel responsible for the real problems in the company. And that is the position that we've reached. Many board directors hide behind the compliance side to show that I have ticked the boxes, I have done my job as best as I can, and here is the evidence. Our challenge is we've got to get more directors to feel responsible for what's happening. And that's the stewardship side. Nobody is going to hold you accountable because stewardship cannot be broken down into very particular tasks and activities. But it's up to you. It's up to you whether you're going to blow the whistle on a scandal. It's up to you whether you feel the chairman is taking us in the wrong direction. It's up to you whether you feel you have a very successful CEO, but they've created a harassment culture within the company. That now requires you to stand up and act. And that is the bit that really requires development, and that's why we here at Henley are pursuing the various board director programs that we are. It is to make directors really feel responsible and be successful in feeling responsible for their role and their contribution.
Thank you very much, Andrew.